Chill here with Serious Dallas Moon. Now, I'm going to paint me a little painting, and while I do, I'm going to talk about the fertility issues or things that contribute. And this is a big disclaimer. Okay, first of all, let's begin. If this episode could trigger you, now is the time to say to yourself, let's watch something else, okay? Very important. If somebody sends you this episode or reverberates anything that you see in this episode, maybe you had social engineering around you, maybe you've had people that are trying to find out information on your family, on your lineage, because right now the world is changing and there's a lot of social engineering, espionage, and downright wish for people, as I mentioned in the previous episode that is now processing. There are a lot of attempts to understand the lineages of people because if, let's say, colonizers reach a certain region, they want to know who are the bloodlines, who are the families, what can they do with each person, and they can send a lot of people or they can send curious people. And this is how, depending on the intelligence or the family or the empire, um, you could be having people trying to pickpocket you, or you could be having people that are actually wanting to deliver good information, but they're doing it I'm going to say the Asian way. What do I mean by that? Where people are going to say, hey, you gained a lot of weight. Why don't you exercise? Or why don't you, all the while, bring in a lot of food that is impossible to not get fat eating. Okay? It's not just Asian, but sometimes people are going to talk about these topics to people, and I want to give a big disclaimer. If you find something here that was reverberated through other means, please feel free to watch something else. Feel free to set your boundaries as to what content you want in your life and what content you don't want in your life. And I am here for nobody that doesn't want that content. Now that I talked about it, I'm going to talk about fertility, and I'm going to talk about things that contribute to issues in fertility or the fetus and the children. Now, when we talk about these things, we always say contribute to, could contribute to. Why am I saying that? Because this is a nervous system, an endocrine system, DNA nervous system issue. And in nervous system, one thing I learned about from my neurodivergent teacher in neurolinguistics was we always say involved, not controlling, not ruling over, involved in. And by the way, this is also a good reminder for me to adopt it in astrology. Okay? Because the same things we can reach with various planets. Now, when I talk about fertility, the one thing that's important, the cultures that denote babies with, I don't know, in our region, the Middle East, then we have these advertisements for fertility where we see um, how do you even say that in English? It's like a geese that brings the baby, and something is really off with that culture. Like I say, I begin with my culture when I talk about those weird things. Um, and we have a lot of people that when they first learn about anything sexual, either they learn about use a condom, but they don't learn about the yes, no, and maybe. It would often be in high school. Um, They would often have weird occurrences with their parents. And the parents could be telling useful things, but there is something that really doesn't deliver the information. As a person that was an English tutor, where I would meet one-to-one with children, with adolescent basically, um, I can say that the gap, oh, the gap. Like child, teenagers showing me K-pop images and their favorite kinks. Um, me having to assert with the child, with the adolescent, that they basically came to whichever kink through their own internal journey rather than because it was trendy. It's like, where's the parent in the next room doing work on infrastructure? But and I came to teach English. So this is something where today it's me, tomorrow it's some other situation or circumstance, where people absolutely do not have mitigation. Fortunately, I was not hired by the Epstein School. um, and yeah, many things involved with that. Now, when it comes to fertility, the cultures that have acquired their wealth by sexpionage and honeypots usually are very known for these type of things. Okay, when I'm half Israeli, half Dutch. In Netherlands, things that are beyond horrid were so normalized that that the only way to manage in the world was to be so extremely naive and think that I'm some sort of an alien when it comes to sexuality, or so dissociated that that one is susceptible to mind control, which was the goal of those programming, um, and Israel and Netherlands are known for their love scams and honeypots, and this is basically an espionage that is meant to assassinate people. Like, by the way, also I don't know about Dutch people, but Israeli people, they go a lot to actually physical. I'm not even talking about like consuming porn, but actually physically, whether it's a part of secret societies or not. And what ends up happening is that Israel is extorted to commit war crimes, and that's even without the Epstein's. Okay, it's like without particularly saying Epstein's, because the country is not necessarily immediately Epstein. Now, in such cultures, what is happening is that we have a courtesan-partisan division.
Git Shabbos.
Gita Shabbos, totally secular family. Um, we, I was not being satirical. We are totally. It's just that we lived around people that are completely not secular, and that caught up. Being like, you could catch when I was living in Iraq, it was really funny. You could catch me um, talking about these things that I talk about, and then going outside. I was like, oh, Gita Shabbos, because the person next to me has nothing to do with directly with the topic, like, because I'm not a Nazi. I mean, not according to the oh God. um, guilt by affiliation, guilt by um, now, because I already know these things. It's like, now here is the thing. The Madonna horse symptom or the courtesan cartisan permeates entire society. And what we get is that people exposure to the erotic is under the courtesan rubric, and um, and they don't actually have any other rubric. They don't actually have an exposure to sensual pleasure that is very contributing to healthy conception, healthy. I know that orgasms are difficult when it's in certain stage of child carrying. Um, I don't know how to deal with that topic when it comes to, let's say, tantric embodiment, because probably it would be like a more full body, something that is taking the orgasmic into, um, how should I say that? We would have to like really control. Do we really contract or do we have lighter orgasms? Something along the line, but I haven't learned how to do sexuality during pregnancy. Um, and also, when it comes to labor, there were so many satires about that. Mommy Knows Best was the worst, but also the funniest. Um, I may have been personally jabbed by the in one of them, but anyway, when it comes to um, these topics, and I'm trying to blend the colors that I have, which is green and blue, green and red, and gonna give it a green and olive green. Oh, green and blue. I did blue and red. I don't know why did I do blue and red. And I'm adopting a used plate from a coffee. A used carton plate that didn't have stains on it for a canvas because it's wartime. So this is wartime art. Oh, it's actually, what am I doing? Blue. Where's the blue? It is here. So, now, because people can't have an orgasm without being considered a whore or courtesan, there is both the culture of reclaiming, which I don't find vibing with my entire atmosphere, um, particularly not when we are sensitive to the nervous system. Now, again, every person has their own way, and the frequency of reclaiming can be way better than the frequency of shame and so on and so forth. So, or people simply don't, or the orgasm becomes something that people are pushed to have rather than enjoy having. Um, I was once scolded by a relational teacher, and um, yeah, because I talked about something. She told basically I'm going to say the thing because it's very important to the topic and to fertility. Oh my god, I really hope they already have a baby. Don't watch this if it's not if it's too triggering. Okay, it's like don't explode on me this time. um, But the thing is, the teachings that she learned was about always to be mysterious, not to be, not, how should I say that, not to ever completely let go in front of a man. And I'm like, um, but what about cervical orgasms? Because me, the Scorpio ninth house, has communicates through sexual analogies, albeit recovering from some sort of ritual abuse, which creates a pack of anomalies and misconstrued perceptions. People have Mercury next to my Mars. You do not know my sexuality. Just accept it that it's a bias. And here's the thing, it's in Scorpio, so they're curious. It can cause misunderstandings of sexuality. Um, Now, and oh, vice versa, or somebody, or the Mercury can say something and the Mars can assume that they act it, or the Mars can express something and the Mercury can assume that they understand that. Um, my mom has Mercury next to my Mars. Okay, like the nightmare is real. And yeah. Um, Anywho, when we talk about these topics, not being able to completely let go, to trust, to completely be there, has a lot to do with conception and birthing. I know it hit it. There is hitting the spot is like a midway thing. Okay, this thing is what we didn't know thing. Think about it for people that have a cervix, and when people have cervical orgasm, it's like you don't even know where you're coming from. Because something between the spirit and the matter dissolves. Um, and this is and this completely negates any honeypot or honeypot atmosphere, because even people that are completely not honeypots, fortunately, it means that they weren't raped and trafficked. Um, then they can be in the environment of that, and that alone, I can attest that I have difficulties to even be with me because of all the rituals that are done in my country. So, the people that have um, those type of frequency collapsing that are basically countering fertility. When I say countering fertility, they're countering the housing, they're countering the make a life while making a living, which is also opportunities at work, in business, um, life satisfaction, overall well-being, and health. And they tell that those are regions where there's a lot of industries that are scammy in the very tender sense of the word. Um, so yeah, and this is where we would have issues with a desire to control population, a wish to increase births, a wish to decrease births, use of psychiatry as castration, um, and um, this is also where the children, the infants themselves, are born into a neurosis, into a nervous system that is highly excited and not calm and loving, even if it's in the vicinity. The children may experience things to do with their own birthing or conception, or things that happened around them. In societies where there is this courtesan where the sexual is under courtesan, is under whore, or is under um, yes, in Hebrew this says now prostitute, um, and this is where um, basically people are unhappy. The infrastructure, the architecture is not supportive of not just the female orgasm, but also the male one. Actually, when I was a student, I was living in a building where there was a brothel. And I did not know it until one day a friend of mine from university was insistent on going to parties, and we went together. And then I came back home in a taxi, and taxi tells me, hey, there's a brothel in your building. And I was like, really? I don't know. I never saw anything. And it's like, I'm not asking, I'm telling you, there's a brothel every night. I drive a couple of men here because he wanted to let me know. He wanted to let me know where I live. And then one day I do this, cleaning and leave the used clothes and stuff like that outside. Two young men come and immediately grab everything. And I was so naive. I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy somebody enjoys that. They're probably taking those for their girlfriends. The loudest person in that building when it came to sexuality was me, not them. I never heard them. Not them, not the men, nobody. Which tells me a very important tale that the infrastructure was not designed for either the male or the female orgasm in those societies. No, I'm not going there. Okay. By the way, when we talk about orgasm, make sure you dedicate your orgasms to yourself or to things you want to manifest. And if you are with a person, really get to know what is their sexual esoteric practice. Let's just put it that way. So, um, I've had bad experience with that. I've had bad experience with that um, in astral. And what can I say? That's that's a part of those things where people, even though they may live in the same country or culture, they may not really know. Okay? And it can be around the 8th house or the 12th house, which refers to what I talked about in previous episodes. It is still processing. Now, those societies that don't have a place for our sexual pleasure for the sake of sexual pleasure, that is, with both people or all people who participate really actually wanting to be there, really embodied, um, really aware, not people pleasing, and of course not violating anybody's boundaries, the entire infrastructure not being supportive of that has implication on all health system, the birthing, the birth rates, um, the endocrine and nervous system of the infants. I'm not even talking cloning stuff. Okay, I'm not going as far as like the Epstein and stuff. The common people. It gets everybody very uncomfortable. And hey, that's okay. Because even when we talk about our own life energy, it's okay to get uncomfortable. It's okay to have people being uncomfortable. Not in a way that is molesting, but in a way that is addressing issues that are kind of important to address at this time. It might be the difference between your country looted or even situations where, like I said, let's take, it's not like Iran is a role model, and yet I'm sure that when people heard they are threatening over Google, Nvidia, and Microsoft, like this is, I did a study case about propaganda with Iranian propaganda. This is one good. This is one good propaganda. Okay, this is really doing the work and learning the enemy, and it's like, what can Iran do that would get the civilians? Because Iranian people saw that they are attacked by the regimes pointing at, hey, the civilians would support the upturn of the regime, and then they shoot a school with people in it, which is probably why they put the the warfare centers within schools. It's something that we saw in Palestine, and that really does get, it really does get the news. It's kind of like, hey, it got Israel and United States to shoot at a school, populated school with all that entails. It got them to do Gaza in Iran, and that was a very unfortunately successful media trick, which media and warfare. But um, when we talk about attacking the very people that genuinely are involved with attacking civilians, that's some good propaganda. That's some interesting warfare that applies to civilians. Um, Now, with all that's happening in the world, a lot of people are curious about a lot of lineages. So, like I said, for families and lineages, now is the time to take the skeletons out of the closet. Because otherwise, the intelligence of another country will do that. And it's very easy, people, people become homeless, people become hospitalized, people become, try to escape or travel, and then the juicy stuff comes out. People think, oh, the juicy stuff is somebody being in hospital or somebody being in jail. No, 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 no. Because this is why in Finland, why do they have housing force independent of ability to work and believe in the schizophrenic patient in Finland? How else would they tackle the KGB? Now they know that internally they also have to deal with things within their own lineage. And here is now in Israeli or American family, or maybe even some Dutch families, where if somebody speaks, they are tagged, hospitalized, and have to be the guinea pig of the family, then the authorities would be very happy to milk out the information. Um, but they only have the family to blame. Like, okay, it's like because people would be very interested to know what happened in that family, what happened in that lineage, and in the past it would be okay, people can pay that and that money, but now the economy is breaking down. They can pay back that and that money, but for China that wants to loot the oil in the Dead Sea, that and that money with that family that has dividend in that oil, um, well, they can have a takeover, might not be, and that schizophrenic patient that was probably raped by somebody in the family is asset. Yep, this is why, for example, I think it's not a secret. Much of my life I've been single, and when people would ask anything about it, I would say the way they would say before 7th October is like, there's no partner. And the thing is that if I actually wanted a person that can honor the erotic and non-erotic self, which would mean that he would not be um, commercial porn consumer, it would mean that his sexuality would not be infused with Thailand or Romania or even Israeli type of trafficking. Um, hmm Social engineering was joking at me, and they were but the point of the joke is themselves. They're the one doing the honeypots. They're the reason there was no partner. Now here's the thing. Of course, it translates to having no partner when it came to peace in the Middle East. This is why when I was after the Me Too, basically um, working at courses that reminded people to have their yes, no, and maybe honored and respected, all of our businesses were super targeted. Um, and it basically means that we will have no effective relational teaching that works on intimate and non-intimate level. It reaches a point where when it comes to fertility, the fifth vital sign, um, the notion that people know their bodies. And even for people that go through technological means of being in children, it is beyond a disaster. It probably creates way more attempts than needed. And even when we talk about this sperm bank, um, there is there is a meaning to normalizing masturbating to industrial porn as commodification of the asset of fertility. And that's something I only recently thought about, where, yeah, all these people were raped until, it's not just raped, they were raped to loss of sense of self, to be completely mind controlled during the entire act. So when you see, I don't know if people, I don't watch OnlyFans or anything like that, but even actors and actresses on the screen, they would sometimes be completely mind controlled. When I did my channeling experiment, actually, I was tortured at hospital, and um, then I connected with channeling, and there was receptivity because for 6 months I was moving. I was studying channeling, so I was moving entirely by channeling. Almost, I mean, of course, I had my sense of self, but I was moving entirely by channeling. And the people that kept that from experiment to a lifestyle, basically, they would get the results. Even people that were trafficked or sex trafficked would only get help if they would present themselves as a story that is grateful to the welfare that was participant in trafficking, is talking about from their own journey or their own story. They would have to tell extremely detailed stories, which is not compatible for everyone. And um, and even when they would want to challenge, let's say, the psychiatric system, then they would really, really have to call what they've been through prostitution rather than what it actually is. If they didn't call it trafficking, they would not get help. Not only that, they would be re-trafficked. That's what we're looking at when we just send a hobby, or people just go to do sperm donation, um, or watching commercial porn. And let's face it, it's not. Do I think that I can I say that I know to recommend a non-commercial sex industry? Um, no, no, because you would really have to eliminate completely all the all the scenarios where people have to film pornography as a part of initiation rite with some secret society where they have to commit treason. And it would be their wives, it would be their girlfriends, it would be their roommate, it would be their bestie, and it goes all the way from children. So, or the tenants even. Of course, that affects fertility. That affects upbringing. And the children that see things, they would be sometimes really, really abused because of that. Because what the children see in the astral are not imagination. The faces may change because People try to encrypt themselves, and I really thank to Lida Sefa that addressed this topic. But if you listen to the testimony of Teal Swan, you know what happened in certain societies. Her family was Mormon, and you know what happened in certain societies when the child actually speaks, that they actually see things, and the parents try to take it to a priest or somebody that knows. Um, for example, if I would be left with, if my father was growing with me and I would talk about things that I saw as a child, I would probably be taken to a rabbi or something of that sort. And what would end up with that would be either Ghislaine Maxwell or some sort of death. Um, this is also the difference between societies that have love that is actually loving, which means that these are sovereign societies, and societies that are tyrannical, authoritarian, and even what people call terroristic. The attempts to control fertility not by natural um, pleasure affirming measures harms the entire frequency of society. It makes a society that is very susceptible to invasion. And here we see, what does Iran attack first? The cloning. They can't say it. And this is Iran. Okay, I'm not talking about the matriarchal society that survived in Afghanistan. It's a and like I said, the fact that the susceptibility to invasion is coming first and foremost from the fertility plagiarizing, which is rapey technologies. Okay, Bill Gates' diplomatic immunity was removed in Kenya because of something that is castration in some sort of, I think it was malaria vaccine. I don't know who's behind NVIDIA, and yeah, and Google is behind the collective forgetfulness. No, it was so lovely to see there's certain periods where the entire Israel history was vanishing during the Israel-Palestine war, and um, and here is the thing. One could say that this is correcting. It's kind of like flipping, flipping the coin. Um, but it's the same coin with its two sides. Um, what more can I say? My blends went out, well, dark because I have dark colors, and I tried to use the lighter green. The green and the blue worked, I think, the best. And then they blended, I think, into a darker green. If I really blended them, they blended into a darker green or not. No, no, I used the olive green here. The green and the blue work the best. The green and the olive green, I think, are pretty fine. Um, the red and the blue were given a lovely dark texture, which can replace black. Um, I love tapping my fingers into the oil, but I definitely need some more. I need more of a brighter colors, but also warmer spectrum. I might find my warmer spectrum. Um, by the way, fertility supportive practices are the practices of Venus and the Moon, which is creating art and so on and so forth, singing. In cultures that cannot have, think about the way that artists are treated. For example, I was thinking volitionally to travel to the north because they have a lot of bombings, and maybe do something artistic with the people sitting in the shelters. But the artists that are commercial artists would be forced by their managers to do that, which is life risking. It's not a volunteer. Um, and another thing that I saw today had to do with Disney, and this was basically I was shown how people are cast into a role. Annika Lucas mentioned that, but not in the Disney context. And people would be cast into a role by observation, and they would be the observation would project a certain role on them. But because it's done also to children, then there's a lot of desensitization, and um, they become like they're really good in what they do. And one of the things I was working on today was the pre-erotic, which is the child self, or the um, or honoring the pre-erotic, which basically means not having the erotic all-encompassing in one's reality, um, and the remembrance that because the energy was where one could be really a sex symbol and very, very sexy, very erotic, very natural, very confident in the sexuality. But when it comes to the actual relationships, and when it comes to actually having a satisfying life, a satisfying love life, an intimate life and relations, because they were seen as an asset, they were seen as, artists in the past were, not just in the past, were even castrated, or they were extremely cloned and extremely inbred or bred forcefully and then castrated, um, because they were seen as dedicated or even consecrated to being the artist in their entire life, which is actually taken from indigenous cultures and the way they train the shamans and the healers. And I actually wish to challenge this notion that we need to sacrifice, because I believe that the annihilation of the periodic is actually causing a collapse of the frequency of the tribe or the nation or the people, and a lot of us would have nothing to choose from when it comes to our cultures. Now, at the same time, of course, there are very honoring, belonging, connecting, and the awareness that so many things are done to our artists that we didn't know. And then when we, the people, are connecting with that, it's like, oh, how does that affect our children? But we never ask, did they get the right to be children until they are litigated for something. And then they are already the adult. Um, There is also the question of artists having a handler, and this is basically, from what I got, a very intimate relation, um, because it is being one with, and but unfortunately that includes what is called training, but is actually also torture. Um, and this is also military and intelligence. It's kind of like these roles are infused. Um, and this is also why intelligence people don't actually have the intimate life that can be um, steady and stable and loving. Steady and stable and loving because it's seen artistically as not interesting. And when it comes to the honeypots, people need to be extortable, which means they have to have some sort of a love addiction or love substance addiction. And this is why we never actually had culture that supports love that is actually loving, or that was even considered not interesting, or not a sexy title, or not a story material. Um, and the artistic was considered the sensual and the profane, which of course makes fertility completely fractured. Even outside the circles, even in the eyes of the viewer, because if the training of the, let's say, actor or artist is by observation, then as the artist emits the light from their sun, which is sun is basically our leadership qualities, but also our when we are performers. And this is where um, when the artists emit the light from their sun, they're basically being observed, and the observation, the training by observation, was embedding within them the type of light they emanate. And that light was never allowed to be also honored as a vulnerable and open heart within their interpersonal relations in a way that is honored, because the artistic and the sensual was the profane, and they had to be constantly heartbroken over nothing, because being the mythical goddess to the crowd also entailed being the profane whore, or playing the archetypes of the profane whore, um, which would be the repentant whore if they, God forbid, had a teaching. Okay, Maria Magdalene or Sophia. Um, but that affects not just the artist, but also the viewers. We're basically asked to live the myth, and the whole Neptunian aspect of art, which is the dream and the reality, the blending of the colors, the blending of the personalities, the blending of the energies, um, is actually embedded within the viewer to a degree that does affect their life, and is supposed to, because that's the point of the ritual, and this is also what keep us coming back. It's because it opens a venue of relation to eternity. It's opening event, but here is the thing: we can access the Neptunian with love that is actually loving. And Neptune in Mars sign asks us to reconsider our actions on the myth, or to reconsider our mythical reenactment, and to innovate on the myth. Um, more things that arrive regarding those. And the reminder that the artist is not, um, how should I say that? The artist is not a public commodity or a private asset that is commodified publicly, and at the same time, it also requires the love that is actually loving, because the artist was required, when people were trained within those really, big wealth, then they were used as assassins, they were used as spies, they were used as so many things, where to access, let's say, let's talk about astrology, okay, to access the chart of a celebrity would also be will also become the right of the public to know, which we saw, for example, with the exposure of the Epstein list. And so it's more easily accessed when we talk about, let's say, governors, because to be a private person, each and every person has to be able to be a private person. And yet, the tragedy is that the public persona never actually had the access to a choice that is actually choice, because they were deprived in a way that would open up their artistic venues, but under control. And that would make people, in interface with the cult like myth and the mythification of the cult like. Um, and this is also calling to re-examine the ecstatic, re-examine the, first of all, it's a good invitation to re-examine what we think is psychotic, because there is the actual substance, there is the actual essence, particularly in the age of Gladio, where Neptune and Pluto sextile. Um, but also, become more aware and become more sovereign about the myth, while not forgetting that these